The story opens with a boxer from England named Billy Moore, who is about to have a boxing match. It turns out that he has traveled all the way to Thailand to make a living in boxing. However, just before Billy gets into the ring, he took drugs. This confirmed that he was a heavy addict. When the fight started, Billy's breathing became increasingly difficult due to the narcotics. Despite his extensive preparation and rigorous training, his efforts were ultimately thwarted when his opponent landed a devastating hard punch that sent Billy crashing to the canvas, ending the match. However, Billy bounced back and demanded that they restart the fight. In a moment of frustration, he even attacked the referee and beat him up. Later that night, Billy sought solace at a local bar, where he met someone who offered him money in exchange for narcotics. The next morning, Thai law enforcement officers visited to Billy's residence. Hearing their arrival, he hurriedly hid all the narcotics in his underwear. But despite his efforts, the police managed to catch him and handcuff him before throwing him onto a nearby table. Billy was then escorted to the police station on charges of possession of prohibited substances. The day after, Billy and several other prisoners were transferred to the notorious Bangkok's notorious Klong Prem prison. Upon arrival, they underwent a thorough search, including a clothing search and a body search. Next, Billy was directed to the shooting area, where a prison officer secretly slipped him heroin. He was led to a cramped holding cell, where other inmates were shouting and making noise. Afterward, an officer came to brief the inmates on the prison rules. He told them that gambling, smoking and tattoos were strictly forbidden and violators would be subject to harsh punishment. Then, Billy moved towards the crowd to fill his water bottle. Enraged, Billy prepared to retaliate. But just then, several officers intervened and escorted him to solitary confinement. The next day, Billy was moved to a different cell, which housed several prisoners with tattoos that covered their entire bodies. Shortly after, the leader of the prisoners, Kung, called out to Billy and began speaking in Thai, which Billy found difficult to understand. After a brief exchange, Kung ordered Billy to do push-ups, while the other prisoners mocked and abused him. This of course upset Billy, but he was powerless to retaliate as he was outnumbered and alone. Later, the prisoners offered Billy a cigarette without the guards' knowledge. That same night, when most of the prisoners were sleeping, Billy made his way to the toilet. As he was about to urinate, Kung and his colleagues ambushed him from behind and held him at knife point. They then forced him to witness their assault on an innocent prisoner. This disturbing incident took its toll on Billy's psyche, leaving him unable to sleep that night. The next morning, Billy is overcome with grief upon learning that an innocent prisoner had previously done the unthinkable. Confused, he went to the hospital and asked for painkillers, but the attendant refused to give him any. Billy argued that he had seen other inmates who had received free painkillers, but the officer replied that the medication was not free and asked for money or cigarettes as payment. This caused Billy to lose his cool, prompting him to engage in a physical altercation with the officers, during which he bit one of them in the bit, one of them on the neck. Unfortunately, other officers soon arrived and beat him to a pulp. Billy is then thrown into a cell with an inmate named Fame, who helps him treat his injuries. In the next scene, Billy's legs are handcuffed to prevent him from getting into further physical fights. Afterwards, while showering together with the other inmates, Gung Kung takes advantage of the situation and lights a cigarette while hiding in a corner. They also offered Billy a cigarette from their secret stash, which he consumed secretly. A little while later, Billy thanked Fame for helping him the night before with his injuries. As he asks for a cigarette, she asks if his family deposits money into his account, to which he replies that he has no family. He then borrowed some cigarettes from her, and promised to pay her after he received the money in his account next week. Later that evening, Kung and other prisoners were seen gambling for cigarettes. Billy also exchanged his pack of cigarettes for narcotics, as he was desperate. At midnight, the prison officer woke everyone up and told them that 3 prisoners had been murdered. The next day, Billy found himself in a desperate situation, craving another hit of heroin. He approached a correctional officer, hoping to get his hands on some narcotics. The officer agreed to help him and took him to an empty cell where he gave Billy a cigarette laced with heroin. Surprisingly, he even stood guard while Billy consumed the drug to ensure no one caught him. Later, while in the bathroom, when Billy was using heroin again, 2 inmates suddenly caught him. They demanded some and threatened to punish him if he didn't comply. Him if he did not comply. The situation quickly escalated, and they were about to attack Billy, but fortunately, another inmate came and eased the tension. The next day, Billy returned to his cell, desperately searching for the same officer for narcotics. A short while later, the officer arrived, but this time he refused to give the narcotics to Billy because he didn't pay for them. Out of desperation, Billy agrees to do whatever the officer asks, and the officer orders him to attack the 2 chefs because they were bad for his business. Billy agreed without hesitation. He first hits the stick before going to the kitchen, where he beat the 2 chefs and almost killed them. After the violent incident, the same correctional officer warned Billy not to kill anyone and offered him narcotics as a reward. However, Billy, who had realized the gravity of his actions, refused it. Overcome with guilt and despair, he then went to the bathroom and started crying. During the night, Billy had an emotional breakdown and decided to do the unthinkable. But luckily, an inmate saw his wound and immediately wrapped it with a cloth to stop the bleeding. Later, he called for help and thus saved Billy's life. Later, Billy is seen in his cell practicing boxing moves, hoping to channel his energy and emotions into a positive outlet. His leg cuffs are then removed, allowing him to move more freely. And he heads to the boxing ring where other prisoners are practicing. Despite his wishes, although he wanted to join, the instructor would not let him, probably because of his violent past. Billy later visits Fame to apologize for not replying to her. He again asks for a pack of cigarettes again so that he could give them to the instructor and join the boxing team. He also assures Fame that he will prove himself and will definitely reciprocate. Despite his hesitation, Fame gave the cigarettes to him and allowed him to join the boxing team. After joining the team, the instructor ordered him to enter the ring and fight one of the prisoners. Billy had not fought for a long time, and as a result, he was easily dominated by his opponent. He became disappointed in himself and was further hurt when the other prisoners mocked him. Therefore, Starting the next day, he began a full day of training to regain his boxing skills. One night, Billy observed the inmates playing a cigarette bet. He decided to participate, bet 2 packs of cigarettes, and surprisingly won. The next day, Billy visits Fame at his mini-shop and returns the cigarettes he borrowed earlier. The two then start chatting, and Billy reveals that he has a father and a brother. Out of curiosity, she asked him why he was in prison, to which he confessed that he killed his father because he used to physically abuse him, harassing him. As they continue to talk, their conversation eventually turns into a romance. One day, Billy is scheduled to fight with another inmate who has comparable strength. The fight begins, and soon turned brutal. But in the 4th round, Billy got the upper hand and knocked out his opponent. His opponent with impeccable boxing skills, achieving victory for the first time in prison. Later, the prison warden, Preacha, who witnessed Billy's fight, seemed to be impressed with his skills and called him to his cabin. Preacha then conveys his decision to send Billy to another cell. Another cell that consists of a boxing team, giving him privileges. Furthermore, Preacha said that he was the first foreigner to compete in the national tournament qualifiers. Hearing this, Billy was delighted and also expressed his gratitude for the prestigious opportunity. Before the two departed, Preacha informed him that he only had 2 months for training. After that, Billy was transferred to another cell where he received good treatment from his fellow inmates. He also started practicing hard in preparation for the upcoming tournament. One day during a meal, the inmates shared stories about how they ended up in prison. One of them revealed that he was imprisoned for 5 years, and due to the depression caused by this, he stabbed 3 prison officers, which led to him having to serve an additional sentence of 13 years. He continued to say that he joined the boxing team because he sometimes gets the chance to fight on the outside. He can meet up with his family for a few minutes. Later, Billy also agreed to get a tattoo on his back. As time went on, Billy's training went very well. He also started to regain his confidence. But one day, he caught Fame with another prisoner. This broke his heart, and as a result, he relapsed on narcotics. He also took out his anger on his boxing partners in the ring. Because of this, the officer placed him in an empty cell that was larger than his previous cell. The previous one. Billy spent the whole day working out and practicing his boxing moves. After a few days, he was sent back to the boxing team cell. As soon as the officer left, his angry boxing partner approached him. However, Billy reacted calmly and apologized for what he did earlier. Considering his apology, the boxing team allowed him to return to the ring and also helped him in his training. Eventually, Billy formed a strong bond with his fellow inmates. One night, the ladyboys enter his cell and sing a love song for them. Throughout their performance, Fame kept looking at Billy, implying that she still had feelings for him. One day after rehearsal, Billy was taking a shower when Kung and his gang approached him and demanded a sum of money to shut them up about his drug addiction. Billy asks for time, assuring them that he would win the match and pay them. However, the gang covered his face and beat him up. Before leaving, Kung threatened to inject him with AIDS if he lost the match. Unfortunately, Billy suffers from a hernia, and after receiving treatment, doctors told him that the hernia rupture was caused by excessive narcotics intake, and further trauma could result in death from internal bleeding. Nonetheless, Billy decided to fight, so he was transferred to another prison where the tournament was to be held. On the day of the match, Billy trains with his instructor one last time before taking to the ring. As the match begins, both boxers engage in a straightforward fight, displaying incredible skills. At one point, the opponent's kick hit Billy hard in the stomach, causing excruciating pain. The opponent also committed a foul by kicking Billy when he was down. Regardless of that, our protagonist endured the pain and continued to fight. Eventually, he managed to knock out his opponent with a spinning back elbow, which won him the match. However, his celebrations came to a halt when he collapsed in the ring after vomiting blood. Later, Billy woke up in the hospital and tried to avoid arrest by running away. But after going too far, he realized that he should reconsider his actions and return to the hospital. Billy was then transferred to another prison, where he met his father, who proudly smiled at him. After serving 3 years of his sentence, Billy was transferred to a British prison and granted amnesty by the King of Thailand. If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy to hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice, just to be sure. You should watch the whole movie. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe for more video like this.